The language of avoidant love doesn't sound like love at all to most people. It arrives quietly, in gestures so small they're easily missed, in changes so subtle they seem insignificant compared to the grand declarations and obvious affection that characterize secure attachment. The avoidant person will likely never tell you they love you in the moment they first realize it. They won't pursue you with obvious enthusiasm or express their feelings through effusive declarations. Their love emerges through a specific shift in behavior that's easy to dismiss or overlook if you're waiting for conventional expressions of affection. This shift is the avoidant person lowering their defenses in ways they've never allowed before, taking risks with vulnerability that contradict everything their attachment patterns have taught them about staying safe in relationships. Understanding this shift is crucial because missing it means potentially walking away from someone who is offering you the deepest thing they're capable of offering, even if it doesn't look like the love you expected or hoped for. The shift happens in stages, each one representing the avoidant person moving closer to genuine intimacy despite their terror of it, each one demonstrating that something has become more important to them than their self-protection. When these changes begin appearing together, when the pattern becomes undeniable, you're witnessing something rare and precious. An avoidant person choosing love over fear, connection over comfort, vulnerability over the safety of their walls. They start staying. During discomfort, instead of running, the most significant marker of an avoidant person's love is their willingness to remain present during moments that would normally trigger their immediate withdrawal. The avoidant person's entire relational strategy is built on avoiding discomfort through distance. When conversations become emotionally intense, they typically withdraw. When conflict arises, they typically shut down or disappear. When you express needs or disappointment, they typically deflect or create space. This pattern is so automatic and deeply ingrained that it operates like reflex. The avoidant person feels discomfort rising and their system immediately seeks escape. But when they love you, something extraordinary happens. They override this reflex and stay. This staying manifests in specific observable ways that mark departure from their historical patterns. During conversations about the relationship, conversations that would previously have them checking their phone or suddenly remembering something urgent they need to do, they remain focused and present. Their body language might reveal their discomfort through tension or restlessness, but they don't physically leave. They don't emotionally abandon the conversation by going silent or becoming defensive to the point that communication becomes impossible. They sit with the anxiety that vulnerability creates in them rather than immediately creating distance to relieve that anxiety. The avoidant person who is falling in love begins tolerating the physical sensations of intimacy-related anxiety without fleeing. This is crucial to understand because the avoidant person's withdrawal isn't usually conscious choice, but rather automatic response to nervous system activation. When emotional intensity increases, their body registers threat, their heart rate increases, their breathing becomes shallow, they feel compressed, trapped, like walls are closing in. These physical sensations have always signaled need for immediate escape. But when they love you, they recognize these sensations and choose to breathe through them, rather than obeying their command to flee. You'll notice them taking deep breaths during difficult conversations, physically steadying themselves when you can see they want to leave. You'll observe them pausing before responding instead of immediately shutting down the discussion. You'll see them making eye contact even when it clearly costs them something to maintain it. These small physical choices represent massive internal victories over their attachment patterns. Each moment they stay, when every fiber of their being screams to run, is a moment they're choosing you over their comfort, intimacy over their safety mechanisms. The staying extends beyond just physical presence to emotional presence as well. The avoidant person who loves you stops using their usual deflection tactics quite as reliably. When you express hurt or disappointment about their behavior, instead of immediately dismissing your feelings as oversensitivity or neediness, they pause. They consider what you're saying. They might still struggle to respond with the emotional attunement you'd prefer, but there's visible effort to hear you rather than defend against you. This effort, this attempt to receive your feelings without immediately protecting themselves from them, indicates that your emotional experience has become important to them in ways others' feelings never have been. During conflicts, the avoidant person who loves you demonstrates new capacity to stay engaged rather than stonewalling or disappearing. Historically, any disagreement triggered their flight response. They couldn't tolerate the discomfort of discord, the intensity of two people with different perspectives trying to reach understanding. Their usual pattern was to shut down completely, giving you silent treatment until the conflict was forgotten, or to leave physically and wait until enough time had passed that the issue no longer seemed relevant. But when they love you, they fight their instinct to flee the conflict. They remain in the room. They continue the difficult conversation, even when every part of them wants to end it. This doesn't mean the avoidant person suddenly becomes skilled at conflict resolution or comfortable with disagreement. They're still likely to struggle with articulating their feelings, still prone to becoming defensive, still uncomfortable with the vulnerability that conflict demands. But the crucial difference is that they're struggling while present rather than avoiding the struggle through absence. They're trying to work through the disagreement rather than waiting for it to dissolve through time and avoidance. This effort to stay engaged during conflict represents monumental shift because it means they value the relationship's health more than their immediate comfort. The avoidant person's willingness to stay during discomfort extends to allowing you to see them in vulnerable states they usually hide. Typically, the avoidant person disappears when they're struggling, upset, or going through difficulty. They handle their problems alone, presenting to you only the composed, self-sufficient version of themselves. This hiding serves protective function. If you don't see them vulnerable, you can't reject or hurt them in that vulnerable state. But when they love you, they begin allowing you glimpses of their struggles. They might mention they're having a hard day. They might let you see them when they're tired or overwhelmed instead of canceling plans to hide those states. They might even, in rare moments, ask for support or comfort. These moments of visible vulnerability are extraordinary departures from the avoidant person's normal functioning. Each instance where they let you see behind their carefully maintained facade is an act of trust and intimacy that costs them tremendously. They're exposing parts of themselves they've learned to protect, risking the rejection they've always feared would follow if people saw their needs and weaknesses. The fact that they're taking this risk with you, that they're choosing to be seen rather than hiding, reveals feelings they cannot yet articulate directly. The staying during discomfort also manifests in the avoidant person's increased capacity to tolerate your emotional expressions without immediately trying to shut them down or fix them. Previously, when you expressed sadness, frustration, or any strong emotion, the avoidant person likely responded by minimizing your feelings, changing the subject, or physically removing themselves from your presence. Your emotions created discomfort in them that they manage by making your emotions stop. But when they love you, they develop greater tolerance for your emotional experience. They sit with you while you're upset without immediately trying to make it better or make it go away. They allow you to have your feelings without those feelings triggering their flight response. This tolerance is imperfect and limited. The avoidant person is still likely to feel uncomfortable with your emotional intensity. They might not know how to comfort you effectively. They might still sometimes suggest solutions when you need empathy. But the critical shift is that they're present for your emotional experience rather than abandoning you during it. They're choosing to tolerate their discomfort with your feelings rather than requiring you to manage your feelings to keep them comfortable. This is profound reversal of their usual pattern and clear indicator that your well-being has become more important to them than their comfort. They begin initiating connection without being asked. The second unmistakable sign that an avoidant person loves you is when they start initiating contact and connection instead of only responding to yours. Throughout most relationships with avoidant people, there's clear pattern of one-sided initiation. You're the one reaching out, planning activities, initiating conversations about feelings or the future, making bids for connection. The avoidant person responds, sometimes warmly and sometimes reluctantly, but they rarely initiate. This pattern protects them from vulnerability because initiating reveals want and need they prefer to keep hidden. Reaching out first means risking rejection. Making plans means showing they want to spend time together. Initiating emotional conversations means revealing they think about the relationship and care about its trajectory. But when the avoidant person falls in love, something shifts in their risk calculation. The vulnerability of initiating begins to feel less threatening than the possibility of losing you. They start taking the risk of showing they want your presence and attention. This shift typically begins small and grows gradually as they test whether initiating brings the rejection they fear or the connection they're beginning to crave. The first initiations might be practical or neutral. They text to ask a question, share something they think you'd find interesting, or suggest an activity they want to do with you. These initial forays into initiating feel enormous to the avoidant person, even though they might seem insignificant to you. Each time they reach out first, they're fighting against years of conditioning that taught them wanting someone, and showing that want leads to pain. They're overriding the voice in their head that says staying distant keeps them safe. They're choosing the risk of connection over the safety of detachment. Every text they send first, every plan they suggest, every time they pick up the phone to call you, rather than waiting for you to call them, represents internal victory over their attachment wounds. As the avoidant person's feelings deepen, their initiation becomes more frequent and more emotionally revealing. They start texting you during their day just to share something that happened or to say they're thinking about you. This casual reaching out is revolutionary for someone who typically keeps their thoughts and daily experiences private. By sharing these mundane details, they're inviting you into their ongoing life rather than keeping you compartmentalized as someone they see only in specific contexts. They're building threads of connection throughout their day rather than limiting contact to scheduled interactions. The avoidant person who loves you begins making plans for the future instead of avoiding any discussion of what comes next. Historically, they've stayed focused on the present moment, resisting conversations about future plans because those conversations imply commitment and ongoing connection that feel threatening. But when they love you, they start suggesting things you could do together next week, next month, even further out. They might mention a concert coming up that they'd like to attend with you. They might talk about a trip they want to take with you. They might make reference to holidays or events in the future that assume you'll still be together. These future-oriented statements might seem casual or insignificant, but they represent massive shift for someone whose relationship strategy has been staying non-committal and keeping one foot out the door. By making plans for the future, they're acknowledging to themselves and to you that they expect and want the relationship to continue. They're allowing themselves to imagine ongoing connection rather than protecting themselves by assuming everything is temporary. Each future plan they suggest is small act of faith that you'll still be in their life, small commitment to keeping you there. The avoidant person starts checking in on you without prompting. They ask how something you mentioned went. They remember that you had a difficult meeting or important event and reach out to see how it turned out. They notice when you seem off and ask if you're okay, rather than ignoring the signs of your distress to avoid potential emotional intensity. This attentiveness represents dramatic departure from their usual pattern of avoiding emotional labor and maintaining ignorance about your inner state to protect themselves from feeling responsible for your well-being. When they remember details about your life and follow up on them, they're demonstrating that you occupy space in their thoughts. They're revealing that they pay attention to what you tell them, that your experiences matter to them, that they think about you when you're not together. For the avoidant person who typically keeps partners at arm's length emotionally, this level of attention and follow-through indicates significant emotional investment they can no longer hide completely. The avoidant person begins seeking your company for its own sake, rather than only agreeing to see you when you initiate or when there's specific activity planned. They might suggest just spending time together without particular agenda. They might say they want to see you even when there's nothing specific to do. They might cut other activities short or adjust their schedule to create time with you. This prioritization of your presence represents shift from viewing time together as obligation they manage to experience, they actively want. For someone whose attachment style makes them view relationships as burdensome and time alone as essential, choosing to spend time with you over solitude or other activities reveals how much you've come to mean to them. Each time they choose your company, they're choosing connection over their default preference for independence. They're demonstrating, through actions, rather than words, that being with you has become something they want rather than something they tolerate. The initiation extends to physical affection and intimacy as well. The avoidant person who loves you stops waiting for you to initiate touch and begins reaching for you first. They might take your hand while walking, initiate hugs, sit close to you on the couch, or be the one to initiate intimate moments. This physical initiation is significant because it reveals desire and need that the avoidant person typically hides. Reaching for someone first means showing you want them, and the avoidant person has spent their life protecting themselves from the vulnerability of revealed want. When they begin initiating these various forms of connection without being asked, when reaching out becomes their pattern rather than a rare exception, you're witnessing their love expressed in the language available to them. They cannot yet say the words. They cannot match the level of initiation secure people offer easily, but they're stretching beyond their comfort zone, taking risks that feel enormous to them, even if they seem small to you. Each initiation is offering evidence that you've become important enough for them to override their instinct for self-protection and reach toward you instead of waiting for you to reach toward them. They share their internal world spontaneously. The third unmistakable sign of an avoidant person's love is when they begin sharing their internal world without being asked or prompted. The avoidant person typically keeps their thoughts, feelings, fears, and struggles locked away as protection against the vulnerability of being known. When asked direct questions about their internal experience, they offer minimal responses or deflect entirely. They've learned that revealing their inner life creates opportunities for judgment, rejection, or being burdened with others' attempts to fix or manage their feelings. The safest path is keeping their internal experience private, sharing only the external facts and observable behaviors that reveal nothing about their emotional reality. But when an avoidant person loves you, they begin voluntarily opening windows into the interior landscape they usually keep sealed. They mention something that's worrying them without you having to drag it out of them through questioning. They share a memory that affected them. They talk about their day in ways that include their feelings about it, rather than just reporting events. They express opinions and preferences they usually keep hidden to avoid potential conflict or the vulnerability of taking a position. Each of these spontaneous revelations represents the avoidant person choosing to be known by you rather than remaining hidden. This sharing typically begins with relatively low-risk disclosures. The avoidant person might mention they're stressed about something at work. They might share that they're excited about an upcoming event. They might express frustration about a situation involving their family. These disclosures seem mundane and might not register as significant to you, but for the avoidant person, they represent crossing threshold they normally maintain. They're letting you see that they have an emotional life, that things affect them, that they experience feelings about their experiences. This basic acknowledgement of emotional reality is something the avoidant person usually conceals. As their feelings for you deepen and as they test whether sharing their inner world leads to the negative consequences they fear, the disclosures become more revealing. They might share something they're afraid of. They might express self-doubt or insecurity they usually hide. They might talk about a past experience that shaped them. They might reveal a hope or dream they have. These deeper shares represent increasing trust that you won't use their vulnerabilities against them, won't judge them for having needs and fears, won't see them as weak for having an emotional interior that includes struggle and uncertainty. The avoidant person who loves you begins explaining their reactions and behaviors rather than leaving you to guess at their motivations. Previously, when they withdrew or behaved in ways that hurt or confused you, they offered no explanation. They expected you to accept their behavior without understanding its origins. But when they love you, they start offering context for their actions. When they need space, they might explain that they're feeling overwhelmed rather than just disappearing. When they're distant, they might share that they're processing something difficult rather than letting you assume you've done something wrong. When they react defensively, they might later explain what triggered them rather than leaving the defensive reaction as the final word. These explanations represent the avoidant person taking responsibility for helping you understand them rather than requiring you to navigate their patterns in darkness. They're acknowledging that their behavior affects you and that you deserve insight into what's driving it. This is massive shift from their usual position of keeping you perpetually confused about their internal processes while expecting you to accommodate their patterns without understanding them. The avoidant person starts expressing appreciation and gratitude more freely. They notice things you do for them and acknowledge those things verbally. They mention qualities they value in you. They thank you for patience or understanding you've shown. These expressions of appreciation don't come naturally to someone whose attachment patterns involve minimizing dependence on others and avoiding acknowledging what they receive from relationships. Expressing gratitude means admitting they notice what you provide, that it matters to them, that you enhance their life in ways they could not provide for themselves. When they begin verbalizing appreciation, they're allowing themselves to acknowledge your value and importance rather than maintaining the protective fiction that they don't need what you offer. Each expression of gratitude is small admission of dependence and care that costs them tremendously to voice. They're revealing that you affect them, that your presence and actions matter, that you're not as irrelevant to their well-being as they've pretended people always are. The avoidant person who loves you begins sharing their thoughts about the relationship itself. They might comment on something they enjoy about being with you. They might mention how the relationship is different from previous ones. They might express concern about something in the dynamic or hope for how things might develop. These meta conversations about the relationship have always been territory the avoidant person avoids, because engaging with relationship as subject makes it real and significant in ways that feel vulnerable. By speaking about the relationship directly, they're acknowledging it exists as entity that matters to them rather than maintaining their usual stance of vague non-commitment. They're allowing themselves and you to see that they think about the relationship, have feelings about it, care about its trajectory. This acknowledgement removes some of their protective ambiguity and represents movement toward genuine partnership, where both people consciously participate in shaping and tending what they're building together. The spontaneous sharing extends to the avoidant person revealing their needs and asking for what they want, rather than expecting you to guess or going without. Historically, They've hidden their needs to protect against the vulnerability of wanting something from someone and risking not receiving it. They'd rather suffer lack than expose themselves to potential disappointment or rejection. But when they love you, they begin taking the risk of expressing needs. They might ask for reassurance when they're feeling insecure. They might express wanting more of something you provide. They might share that they need support with something they're facing. These requests represent profound vulnerability because they reveal the avoidant person is not the completely self-sufficient island they present themselves as. They have needs like everyone else. They want things from their relationship. They're affected by whether those needs and wants are met. Allowing you to see this need, to know that you have power to fulfill or disappoint them, represents trust that costs them everything their attachment patterns have taught them to withhold. They show fear of losing you instead of indifference. The fourth, and perhaps most telling sign that an avoidant person loves you is when cracks appear in their facade of indifference about whether you stay or leave. The avoidant person's typical relational position is that they're fine either way, that they can take or leave the relationship, that they don't need anyone. This position protects them from the vulnerability of caring whether someone chooses them. If they appear not to care whether you stay, they protect themselves from the pain and powerlessness of wanting you to stay while being unable to control that outcome. But when they love you, this protective indifference becomes impossible to maintain. They begin showing signs that your presence in their life matters profoundly and your potential absence frightens them. This shift often emerges first through heightened attention to your emotional state and satisfaction with the relationship. The avoidant person who previously seemed oblivious to whether you were happy becomes attuned to signs of your contentment or dissatisfaction. They notice when you're quieter than usual. They pick up on changes in your energy or enthusiasm. They become aware of moments when you seem distant or withdrawn. This attention reveals that they're monitoring the relationship's health because they care about its continuation. They're scanning for threats to the connection they've come to value, even as they cannot yet openly acknowledge that value. When you seem upset or distant, the avoidant person who loves you responds differently than they have historically. Instead of using your distance as opportunity to create more space themselves, they move closer. They ask what's wrong. They express concern about whether you're okay. They seek reassurance that the relationship is okay. These responses contradict their usual pattern of welcoming distance and treating others' withdrawal as permission for their own. The fact that your distance now troubles them, rather than relieving them, reveals how much they've come to depend on your presence. The avoidant person begins showing visible anxiety during or after conflicts. Previously, disagreements didn't seem to affect them much. They could have a fight and proceed with their day as if nothing happened, leaving you to process the conflict alone while they appeared unbothered. But when they love you, conflicts create anxiety in them because conflicts threaten the relationship's stability. You'll notice them checking in after arguments to ensure you're still okay, that the relationship survived the disagreement. You'll observe them making more effort to resolve issues rather than letting them linger unaddressed. You'll see relief on their face when you show signs that you're not leaving despite the conflict. This anxiety about conflicts reveals that they no longer take your continued presence for granted. They recognize that conflicts could lead to endings, that you might decide the relationship isn't worth the difficulty. This recognition frightens them because somewhere along the way, you became someone they don't want to lose. The fear might not be expressed directly, but it shows in their behavior, in their increased care during disagreements, in their visible need to repair after ruptures. The avoidant person who loves you becomes more attentive and invested when you show signs of pulling back or creating distance. If you become less available, less initiating, less emotionally expressive, they notice. And rather than mirroring your distance or welcoming it, as previous versions of them would have, they respond by increasing their own effort. They reach out more. They initiate more plans. They check in more frequently. They ask if something is wrong. This responsive increase in pursuit reveals that your withdrawal triggers fear in them rather than relief. They're experiencing the anxiety that you've felt throughout the relationship when they've withdrawn, and this anxiety drives them to pursue connection rather than protect themselves through distance. This pursuit, when you pull back, is particularly significant because it represents complete reversal of the avoidant person's typical pattern. Usually, distance begets more distance with them. Your withdrawal gives them permission to withdraw further, creating ever-expanding space that eventually ends the relationship. But when they love you, your distance creates urgency to close the gap. They're motivated to restore connection because your presence has become something they need rather than something they tolerate. This motivation, this drive to pursue rather than retreat, signals profound shift in their attachment to you. The avoidant person begins expressing concern about the relationship's future when previously they avoided all future talk. They might ask where you see things going. They might express worry that you're not happy. They might seek reassurance that you're not thinking of leaving. These inquiries reveal that they're thinking about the relationship's continuation and trajectory, that they're concerned about its stability, that they're invested in your commitment remaining intact. Someone who doesn't care whether the relationship continues doesn't ask these questions. The fact that they're asking reveals care they can no longer hide. When you mention other people who show interest in you or opportunities you have that might take you away from them, the avoidant person who loves you responds with jealousy or concern they previously wouldn't have shown. They might become more attentive. They might make disparaging comments about the other person or opportunity. They might increase their own efforts to secure your attention and investment. These responses reveal possessiveness and fear of losing you that contradict their usual stance of not caring who else is in your life or what other options you have. The jealousy might be subtle and denied if you point it out directly. The avoidant person's pride prevents them from admitting they feel threatened by competition for your affection. But the jealousy shows in their behavior, in their increased presence when they perceive threats, in their need to reassert their position as primary in your life. This jealousy, this fear that someone else might take their place, reveals how important that place has become to them. The avoidant person starts making commitments and following through on them more consistently because they recognize that their unreliability threatens the relationship. Previously, they made plans loosely and cancelled frequently, treating commitments as suggestions rather than obligations. But when they love you, they become more reliable because they understand that their flakiness hurts you and creates justified doubts about their investment. They show up when they say they will. They follow through on plans. They keep their word more consistently. This increased reliability represents them prioritizing the relationship's health over their desire to keep all their options open and maintain maximum flexibility. The shift from indifference to clear concern about losing you might be the most definitive sign of the avoidant person's love, because it represents the crumbling of their primary defense mechanism. The indifference has been armor protecting them from the pain of caring whether someone stays or goes. When that armor cracks and you can see they're actually terrified of losing you, you're seeing their heart exposed in ways it never has been before. They're admitting through their behavior what they cannot yet say with words. You matter tremendously. Your presence is essential rather than optional. Losing you would hurt in ways they've spent their life protecting themselves from experiencing. This fear of loss doesn't make the avoidant person suddenly perfect or fully available. They're still struggling with their patterns, still limited by their attachment wounds, but they're struggling while caring about the outcome, working to maintain connection rather than maintaining comfort through distance. When you see an avoidant person showing genuine fear of losing you, fighting to keep you close despite their discomfort with closeness, adjusting their behavior because your happiness matters more than their defenses, you're witnessing love expressed in the only language they currently speak. Don't ignore it. Don't dismiss it because it doesn't look like secure love. Recognize it for what it is. Someone moving toward you, despite everything in them that says moving toward people is dangerous. That movement, that choice to risk being hurt rather than risk losing you, is their declaration of love.